would be thrilled when he sees that I've taken all the drivers out. So shout out to FOMO. Don't pucker up too much. Okay, you expect me to pay $8,000 for a bookshelf speaker that doesn't really go much below 100 hertz? The directivity index is nice. And matter of fact, it may be the best that I've seen so far from any speaker, period. Subjectively, one of the best, no, probably the best mid-range I think I've heard to date.
Hey, welcome, Aaron.
Well, I did not expect that. What's up, man?
Well, I wanted to put on the highlights of the review of the speaker, but of
Yeah.
course, it's not about $8,000 speakers. I think what that speaker serves for me is, okay, so you have this reference, but is that the last 0.5%, the last 1%, the last 5%? It's
Right.
great to have perspective, and you are one of the few that have just focused on reviewing speakers, both subjectively and the measures. I know Joe and Tell's doing that as well as
Mhm.
Amir ASR, where it's not just about the measurements, it's also listening. But then which parts of the measurement reflect the listening experience? I'm still discovering that.
Mhm.
And before we jump into all of this, I would like to thank Aaron for taking the trouble first to go through. You guys saw that clipple, right? That's all Aaron. Number two, for those of you who want to do these measurements, how much does the clipple cost, Aaron, if they wanted to buy one?
If you wanted to buy one with all the stuff you need to get started, it would be about, I think it's about 120 USD today,
Okay.
120,000 USD today.
120,000, not $120.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, right. I think it's about 99,000 euros. So whatever the conversion rate is as of today.
Right.
I haven't
And
checked in a while.
and that's a lot of dedication, right? That basically recreates an anechoic chamber, but it's
Right.
still simply, it's, to me, it represents a commitment from you, which leads to a second commitment from you. You reached out to me and you said, look, I'll pay for shipping. And for you who don't know, the shipping, including insurance, was what, a little over $400?
Yeah, I think it was like 430. Yeah.
Okay, so everybody, please, all super chats today is going to contribute to help poor Aaron offset the cost of the $430 shipping, because really it's for all of us to understand, one, what makes these speakers great, if they are indeed great with these measurements, and number two, it helps you buy speakers that may not be 8,000, maybe it's 800, but they share some common traits where you get closer to what Aaron's hearing and what I hear from these amazing speakers without paying triple digits, quadruple digits, right?
Right.
And lastly, any super chats we receive today, I'll match. So that way it'll help Aaron get closer
Oh,
to
wow.
his
That's nice. That's
$430, you know?
totally unexpected, man. I appreciate that. I thought I was just coming on here to brag about me getting to test your awesome speaker.
Oh,
So
well, we're all the
anything
same
else is a
team
bonus.
here. Hey,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not cheap. It's not cheap. And I know I've seen your channel, you do hard work, but it's not one of those channels where, dancing teenagers, right? A million views.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
ain't
want to
making
see
money.
Aaron dance. I don't want to see Aaron dancing. So we'll
Why
take
not,
his
man?
speakers, right?
Why not? Come
What
on, man.
the? Oh, wait. Okay. Michael,
Oh, dang.
if this is US dollars, he's just $100 closer to paying for this. So
That's
thank you so
awesome,
much,
man. Thank
Michael.
you,
So,
Michael. For real.
and this is what
Appreciate
we're
that.
talking about here today. So, and all of you questions, just keep on asking. We'll be answering questions throughout. And please click like too, guys, because this will get out and more people get to watch. And maybe we could help Aaron pay for the shipping and shipping it back to me. So
Right. Yeah,
he's
I've already
taking
paid
my.
for the yeah. I've already paid for the shipping one way. I was just like, you know what? I want to see it. I know other people want to see it. I'll figure out the money later. Let me get the speaker now.
Right.
So
Absolutely. And so, hello to everyone. Let's do a quick shout out to all those who showed up this morning on a weekend to talk speakers generally and what makes a great speaker. And I love that you were surprised by the mid range. I really want to talk to you about that because that's something that
mhm.
you didn't expect to hear. The Dutch and Dutch, I know, is a standard because of its DSP, but to get something
Right.
like that in a passive speaker without any DSP, there was no DROC or anything like that, to me is quite amazing. So, hey, Chris, see you all the time. Evan, Michael, and CMS, the regulars, crypto color lights tech. Hello. And if you have questions about this speaker in particular, anything else, hey, Dirk Jan, and hello, David Wheeland, Eric Albert. All right, I think I caught up. And of course, thank you, Michael Ellis, for that super chat. For anyone that just joined us, I am matching all super chats today to help Aaron offset the cost of sending these speakers and shipping them. And if you don't know, he
Maybe I
does.
shouldn't do that.
I don't. Yeah. Now they're gonna take that money back, right?
And I think I'm like, give it back.
Oh, easy HT Tech. Thank you,
What's
buddy.
up, Ike? Thanks,
And I have
man.
to let you guys know it is not cheap testing these speakers because the Clipboard is an incredibly expensive piece of equipment that lets us really test really cool speakers. And if you check
Right.
out Aaron's channel, which I've linked below, or at least a review, right? He's reviewing speakers that we wouldn't know if it's good or bad unless it's gone through the rigmarole of this. So, Aaron, why don't you tell me the S4B by Perlisten SB4? I forgot. S4B, SB4? I forgot the name.
S4B, yeah.
S4B, okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your impressions that you had some time with and so
Yeah,
forth.
yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I guess to kind of recap, my process is to listen to the speakers first, and then I take notes on a sheet of paper, and excuse me, my voice is going out because I've got some kind of sinus stuff going on all week. Anyway, so I take notes on what I hear, and then I go and measure the speaker, and then I go back and I kind of look at my notes from listening versus what I'm seeing in the measurements, and I try my best to try to draw correlations in there. The subjective part is always a little bit wonky, so I rely heavily more on the objective for my reviews. But to me, the science in it is trying to do the correlation between the measurements and what I hear. So, and then after I go and do that correlation, then if I see anything that I think can be improved via EQ, or if I want to try to play around with something to see if what I heard is at a particular frequency range, or if it's related to the reflections in the room or something like that, I'll go in and use the DSP. So I've got a mini DSP, I think it's the DD88 I don't know. It's something. It's 8 channel in, 8 channel out. It has a ability to do Dirac, but most of the stuff I do is manual equalization, just as sanity checks and playing around
Right.
to make recommendations.
So, and that's a great segue to make recommendations. So, on the one hand, if a person costs no object and they're looking for passive speakers that cut off at 100 hertz because they have
Yep.
a subwoofer, yeah, the Perlisten is the obvious choice. But then the recommendation itself, based on the measurements that you have, because you take a lot of measurements, but can we isolate maybe one or two specific areas of the measurement that have the most positive impact on the quality of the sound?
Right. Well, so it's kind of hard to isolate them down to just a couple. I mean, certainly you can, but I hate to get caught up in the trap of just evaluating one thing and saying this is more important. But if I had to say, I would lean more into looking at the on-axis response because that's prevalent. Then you look at the horizontal response to see what the sidewall bounces are going to be like. You look at the directivity to see, make sure the off-axis response is about the same as the on-axis response. And the reason that that is important is because whatever you're hearing as direct sound coming at you, you want that to be kind of backed up by the reflections from the walls. If the reflections from the walls, if they sound different than what is hitting you first in the direct sound, then that really messes up the timbre, which timbre is a funny word. If you look at it, it looks like it's spelled timbre or timber
Timbre,
yeah,
or the French
timbre,
timbre,
yeah.
timbre.
So people know I'm talking about like tonality, the things that you listen for. Is it bass heavy? Is the mid range? Is there a suck out in the mid range? Is the tweeter match up with the mid range, or is there a dip somewhere through there in like the 2 to 3 kilohertz area? There's all these different things that some people may prefer a little bit more than others, but the vast majority of people, based on research, tells us that most people like a neutral on-axis response and neutral falling off-axis response. So
Now, one of the things that make this speaker in particular unique, and I think copycats will come because the design
absolutely
is still there, right? Is
right.
how they did it, that 0.5, that half, the 2.5 mid-range where they
Yeah.
had the 2 in the center, and you took it apart. So Buddy Love, thank you for the super chat. And for everyone who doesn't know, who just joined
Oh,
us,
thank you.
for every super chat that you guys give, I'm going to match it because all super chats today will go towards helping Aaron offset the cost of shipping. The shipping alone of these two massive speakers are over $400. I mean, these things were heavy and definitely had to be insured, but it was well worth it for all of us to benefit from his insights. So thanks a lot, Buddy Love, for
Yeah.
that super chat. Yeah, tell us a bit about that unique mid-range tweeter array. I think they call it
Yeah.
beamforming, right?
Let me
Oh,
grab
there
that
you
real
go.
fast.
Yeah, pull it
I
out.
got it.
And how can and we're wondering, okay, less expensive speakers, what can we do with less expensive speakers to get that same effect? Because obviously they're using exotic designs now,
Right.
and
Right.
maybe someone else could kind of copy that. But go forth.
It'll
Explain
be
to the audience.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So there are designs that are similar to this. I'm not going to say that this is the very first design that's like this. I'll just say that's the first design that I've personally come across that does as well as it does. I think that's the best way to put it. So what you see here is this is kind of the waveguide. Now this is the top portion of the speaker, and then you've got the tweeter set inside of the waveguide, and then you've got two mid ranges. And somebody did comment on my video that they're all the same speaker, and they're actually not. I don't know if you can see it. Let me flip it around here.
The driver, you mean the driver? You mean the?
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, the drive units themselves. So they're actually a different model number for the tweeter, and then the mid one and the mid two are different model numbers from that tweeter. But the way that this works is there's a lot of overlap between the mid and the tweeter. So the tweeter will go down. I think the crossover is, I'm ballparking, it's around 1,000 hertz or so. But the mid ranges come in around, I don't know. Again, I'm just recalling from memory, 800 to 2,000, something like that. So there's some overlap, and that, for one, is to kind of help shore up the response to the tweeter, so it takes some of the pressure off the tweeter. But then also to kind of do some beam forming where it matches the directivity between the mid ranges, these two mid ranges, and the mid woofer that sits below it. And the reason that's important is because when you have a directivity mismatch vertically or horizontally, like I said before, you get a mismatch in what you hear coming at you versus what is hitting the walls or the ceiling or floor and coming back at you that way. And that really messes up the overall sound character of the speaker itself.
So you mentioned a few things that many people maybe not understand. So directivity
Yeah.
is the pattern, or I guess
Yeah,
how far apart it spreads. So you said
right.
horizontal and vertical need to match. Now these speakers are kind of different because it's vertical is almost limited.
Very narrow,
versus,
yeah.
right. But then it turned
Right.
out, is that why you think that the mid-range sounded great? Because you're like, wait, I'm hearing stuff I didn't hear before. How does that connect? Like, what is
Exactly.
bringing that out?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the important part is when you hear something, you try to use some reasoning and some logic, and you may not be right, not without really digging into the design and recreating it and start taking things away. That's what you do in analysis. My day job is that. But all you're left with is what you can't control. You look at the data and you see, well, everything else that I've seen in this performance, there's a lot of things that are similar to other speakers, but there's this one thing that really stands out, and that's the vertical radiation pattern. So how wide the sound waves are from top to bottom. And above about 1,000 hertz or so, the radiation pattern really narrows up, and it's like a beam. Instead of being very wide and spreading sound all throughout in front of the speaker, it's like laser focused. So it's only about plus or minus 30 degrees of that beam coming right out the front of it. And I think that may be some of the reason why I heard some details in the mid-range that I've not heard from other speakers.
And yet,
it could all be hearsay.
Right. And yet near the end, you're saying, make sure you have the tweeters just at ear level or a little bit above. Why is that?
Because there is a notch, and when you go above the tweeter level at about the 1 kilohertz area, which is where that crossover region is. Now, the thing about this speaker is it's a really steep notch. But what's important about that is, let's say you're listening to it on axis eye level, and then you hear everything, the sound is full, but when you go above it a little bit, you lose some of that energy from the 1 kilohertz area. So it doesn't really quite match the on-axis response.
So
are we losing people here? I'm trying not to.
No, I'm
trying not to.
We will soon get to how do we apply these concepts to affordable speakers. Exactly where we're going now is
exactly.
We know why these are great, obviously. And the common refrain is for $8,000, they better be great. But
they absolutely
what I'm
better
seeing,
be.
Right? But you're seeing a trickle-down effect, like the monolith speakers that were recently released. It has a waveguide. It's $189 per speaker.
Right.
Possibly the least expensive waveguide speaker where you have a legitimate waveguide, not just a random waveguide. They just threw together, look, we got a waveguide.
Right.
Now, based on your experience, your measurements, what you're seeing, let me put this up because you shared this with me over here. What are your recommendations in terms of, okay, these are great, but as you go down the price range, what are you seeing that is sharing these similarities? And what is that similarity they're sharing?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm not seeing anything that's sharing the similarity with this, at least that I can recall, other than just recently, Dennis Murphy's. Oh, cool. I didn't realize I'd share that. Oh, yeah, it was in the private chat. Sorry. I'm getting off track. Guys, I've got ADHD, in case you didn't know. So as soon as I see something shiny, I'm like, squirrel.
Squirrel.
Squirrel. Yeah, anyway. Dennis Murphy's got his BMR floor standing speaker that was just reviewed by James Larson at Audioholics. And you guys may want to check that out. Now that I'm not saying that's the same, but that MTM type design can lend itself to a more narrow vertical directivity if the design is done right. The problem is that a lot of MTM type designs, like tower speakers, they're not done well. So you get some really bad mismatch from the tweeter to the mid-range, or the mid-range to the mid-woofer. And that really messes up the overall sound vertically and even horizontally as well. So that's why I say I've not really can tell you that I've heard anything that's similar to this or seen anything that's similar to this particular design. This one is pretty unique to me. But
now, Dennis Murphy, because you mentioned his name, it's our common ADHD here. Oh, and don't forget to click like. Thank you, Crypto Color Lights, for reminding us all. If you click like, more people will find it, and then they can then help us offset shipping. Do a super chat. I'll match that super chat to help Aaron pay for shipping back to me. Yes, there's some self-interest. I do want those speakers back, and I want to make sure Aaron doesn't sell his children to get them back to me. Or knowing that he won't sell his children, I may not get my speakers back. So
no, I've already booked a flight out of the country. So, I mean, the speakers are going with me. I'm checking them. Yeah, they'll fit in the carry-on.
Oh, and speaking of Dennis Murphy, I keep forgetting. So
yeah. All right,
I had him. Actually, I received it. He custom designed for me a speaker where I told him, look, it'll be almost near field, so I don't care about dispersion that much. Give me something where I could really listen into the mid-range. So he designed something where he loved the mid-range driver, and he designed around the mid-range driver. I think they were the Akuton cells.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he just loved their accuracy, because I'm using it just for what we're doing here, which is mixing and stuff. And then occasionally, if I need the entire range, I could hear the entire range if I wanted to. So it's a three-way that goes down to almost 40 in a cabinet, and he designed and sent it over. I'm like, there's so few speaker makers out there that are so good with their crossovers, and they're able to design what you want, that if any of you have a little bit of money, Dennis will design you a speaker for not, relatively speaking, it is definitely cheaper than the Perlistens, but you get it kind of to fit your use case if you want to, because he is a master craftsman. It's a dying breed of custom speaker makers out there. So Dennis Murphy, you're the man. And as soon as I set it up, I'm going to show it off for you guys. But it's not for everyone. Yeah, it's not for everyone. I even said, hey, should I send it to Aaron? Goes, don't send it to Aaron. It will fail the dispersion test, because he designed it for right where I got it.
Okay. Interesting. Well, dude, you can't go wrong with Akuton. They make some incredible stuff. They're not cheap, but they make some incredible stuff.
Hey, thank you, Sammy Debs. Every dollar counts. All these super stickers and super chats is going to help offset shipping that I will match at the end. And there we have it. Thank you. Okay, so we're talking about the speakers that you have listed here. And tell me, how did you come up with this list? Let's start with less than $100. The NUMI BS5, and I have to say, for under $100, that's a great price. What are its limits, and what can people do with that speaker? Can they do a 5.2.4 home theater system? Where can they use the speaker?
Right. So in general, what you can say is that, and this pretty much holds true, is that the cheaper the speaker, the less loud it's going to be able to get. Right. So you can make great speakers for little money if you know what you're doing, but the problem is getting them to be loud and have a lot of output. So if you're listening at 12 feet away for a movie theater or a home theater, and you're expecting them to get crazy loud, that's just not going to happen. And as you go up, generally, again speaking, as you go up in price, you get more output. That's really what drives in my opinion, the hi-fi segment versus the home theater segment. Is both designs should be neutral. They should abide by the same standards. But if you're not going to be listening as loud, you don't really need some of the output capabilities, and therefore you can save a little bit of money. And that's my opinion.
And so let's talk about the output capability. This is definitely a function of distance. How far are you sitting away, right? So if you're sitting 6 feet away, well, you don't need that much SPL. So these NUMIs for under $100 for home theater use, let's say, how what's the farthest you should sit away if they represent LCRs, left, center, right? Because a lot of
Right.
our viewers are like, look, I spent all my money on this amazing receiver to get Aura 3D, darn you, Techno
Yeah.
Dad, and Show and
Yeah.
Tell.
That's
I
right.
got literally $100 per pair left.
Yeah.
How close do I have to sit before I reach the limits of its SPL?
Well, first thing, you should be running a subwoofer, right? So we're going to
Yeah.
assume that these people are have spent, maybe 100, 200, $300 on a budget level
Yeah,
subwoofer,
one of
hopefully
those
more.
subs, right? One of the ones you have recommended here, the Infinity
Absolutely.
sub,
Right.
$200, right? So let's say they
Yeah.
match it to that. All right.
Right. Yeah. So I would take that Numi. I would cross it at about 120 hertz because you don't want to strain the lower end. And then I would say that you probably get about 9 feet away. And that's me just kind of recalling off the top. It's been about a year since I've tested that
Right,
speaker
right.
exactly. But, I'd say at a midfield distance, you're probably okay. But I would expect to just bang on them at high output levels, especially with a lower crossover or
Right.
not trying to use the sub at all.
Okay, so this to me is a breakthrough threshold price for 9 feet away. Let's say 8 to 9 feet, right?
Yeah. Just
Best case,
we're
eight to
thumbing
nine
it.
feet within 9 feet. And that sub, you could spend on let's say the least expensive Oro 3D is the 4700H by Denon. That's around a little over 2,000 plus these, and then your next upgrade could be better speakers. But now you could spend some money on the overhead. You have yourself an affordable Oro
Right.
3D,
Right.
affordable, where the speakers is not breaking the bank. It's all about the Oro 3D. Or you can even go lower, get the most affordable Dirac system, the Onkyo, for a little over 1,000 matched to this. And well, it sounds like maybe for $2,000, about $2,000, you can have a full at least a 5.1 system.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? At least,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And that 5.1 system is probably going to be pretty impressive around 2000. And I would love to, well, this kind of leads to this question. Thank you, John Young, for that super chat. And for those who just joined us, all super chats today will go towards shipping the speaker back to me and offsetting what poor Aaron had to go through to pay for shipping both ways. Over $400, my friends,
Yeah, I
to get
appreciate
his
that.
measurements. Yeah, he's not making money on this. He's just trying to offset the cost. So
Right.
anything that you guys do today in super chats, I will match it and then get it over to Aaron to help him pay for that shipping. Hey, John, thanks again for that super chat. Is there a totally wireless speaker system I recommend? Really like the HT89, but still need to hide the power cord. Okay, so that means no power cord, battery powered, and no cable wires. So if it's no power cord, you need cable wires. But if you don't have either, you need battery. What are your thoughts on that? Because I honestly don't know
Dude,
of any
I have
fully
no
powered
idea.
like that. I have
Well,
none. I'm
I
sorry.
legit, I'm not sure that I mean, other than something like Bluetooth speakers, like the, little Bluetooth everybody has kind of sitting around the house,
Right.
but nothing like that I can imagine is going to be out there that would provide you the output that you would want for a home theater.
There you go. I
Yeah.
think that's the problem, John, is in a home theater setting, any Bluetooth speaker you have now only gets so loud before it just cuts out, because if it gets any louder, the battery life is going to fall apart.
Right.
Will it even last through a 2-hour movie? Not to mention subs. Can you imagine battery powered subs? It's like
Yeah,
Tesla
it ain't gonna,
cells, right?
that's going to be a heavy subwoofer or a really expensive one because it's going to have lithium batteries in it. One of the two.
Right. And John, actually, this kind of touches on my I have a pet peeve about people calling anything wireless, and I'm talking about the TV makers, not consumers. It's either a power cord or cable wires. Neither of them are wireless. Personally, I'd rather have cable wires because they're thinner and you can run them longer. Power cords, you're limited to where your power outlets are. I think that's
Yeah.
more of an inconvenience. What are your thoughts on wireless with power cords or the
Yeah.
cable wires? What do you like better?
I think it's all just a misnomer, to be honest with you, because there's nothing that's truly wireless that's worth the darn. I mean, really, I just don't think we're there yet. Now, it'll be curious to see what happens when we get to that point, but we're just not there yet.
And thank you, Evan, for that super sticker. Like I tell everyone, every dollar counts. You're helping out our friend Aaron to, number one, I want him to keep on doing what he does without going to the poorhouse. It is a service to the community, all of us.
Yeah.
And as you see, many of these reviewers, they don't last long because they realize, look, I got a life and I got to do something. And I don't know how you're going to offset that initial purchase of your Clipple, by the way, unless you're
Yeah.
renting it out. A lot of people are telling you, can you just rent it out to the local speaker guys to use and borrow? I mean, is that something that's in your
I've had,
wheelhouse?
yeah, I think we talked about this recently on the Daily High Five, where
Hmm.
I've had people contact me from manufacturers to see if I would be willing to do some stuff for them for money, but I'm just not doing that. I don't want to get into that for personal
Got
reasons,
it.
so I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, once you start going with a brand, whether the brand does well or badly, your name is forever linked to this brand, right? So,
Exactly, exactly.
so here's a great question. Maybe you could help out crypto color lights tech. It's like a tongue twister, my friend.
Dude, you're just gonna have to like give him an acronym or
Crypto, just
something.
call them
You're
crypto, right?
butchering
Crypto
his
C,
name.
Crypto
Yeah, there you go.
C. And it doesn't help that sometimes they
Don't
change their name subtly. Like, wait, what are you today?
don't forget
Like,
the tech though. The tech I feel is important because he's got all of that and he's got the tech at the end. So I feel
yeah,
like that's important.
but it's not in caps, so is it? Right? I don't
I
know.
don't know. I feel like if you didn't put it there, it wouldn't be important, you know? So it's tough to
So his
say.
question is: I have the Yamaha HS8 8-inch studio monitors for my
Hmm.
PC. What do you think about Yamahas? And I think maybe Yamahas in general, or this one in particular. Either way.
You know, honestly, I haven't had a chance to test the Yamahas. That's one that I'm looking forward to, and the old school ones that like the monitors that studios use. Those are the ones that I'm personally interested in as well. I don't even recall if I've seen them tested, although I wouldn't be surprised if Amir has. So I really hate to speak out of turn on something that I don't have at least familiarity with.
Yep.
I could either do
And
it a disservice or hype it up too much. I don't want to do that.
hey, Sammy. Yes, SVS has wireless speakers, but it goes back to John Young's concern. He wants to hide the power cord. So unless the SVS wireless speakers don't have power cords, that's still a limitation.
I
So
mean, I guess if you put like a Tesla coil in your backyard, you know, and then had like fully wireless, just you know,
and that now you have EMI, RFI. You name
yeah,
the you name the MI. It's happening,
yeah,
right?
right, right, yeah,
Not to mention possibly cancer.
yeah, yeah, maybe.
Hey, Andy, JBL Bar 9.1 has a true wireless rear. So they charge you. There you go. So here you have, but it makes sense. Wireless rear, right? The rear is just adding ambient cues. They're not, and they're probably cutting off at 120 hertz or maybe even higher, possibly, because they know, hey,
Oh
it's
yeah,
rare effects, right? But
right.
yes, that is a good point. That now you have that. Maybe you could only buy these rares and connect them all and see if they work as mains. Who knows?
Yeah, you'd have to buy the bar. It sounds like though to charge it,
Yeah,
which I wonder if that's some kind of proprietary thing or if it's like a USB cable and you could plug that into any kind of USB outlet if you had one.
yeah.
That's
And
interesting.
those Yamahas are $3,000 speaker. What? Is that the ones we were talking about?
Woo!
What? Oh, is that the new really nice ones? The ones with the piano gloss? Because Yamaha
Yeah, I think
has
so.
their high-end three-way, or they have a two and a three-way, I think. Is that what you're talking about, Crypto Tech? Let us know. Yeah. Actually, I was kind of curious about those because they use these exotic piano woods for their pianos or something. It's kind of cool. I do
Sounds
appreciate the
fancy.
workmanship. Very fancy.
Yeah, well, that's another thing you're paying for with something like the Perlisten. You know, if it didn't come with that really nice gloss finish, I don't know how much it would be, but it wouldn't be that price.
Right, right. And let me put this back in for everyone to see one more time. Okay, so
Yeah.
we got the $100 per pair. That what is it missing? So obviously, if you go from the 100 per pair to the 250 per pair, what are you getting more that you didn't get with a Numi?
Right. So the BS5, it's still my darling budget speaker, but it's obviously limited. So it's limited in bass output. It's limited in SPL, overall SPL, like total output. It's got a couple things in the response that make it kind of not so great. But for that price, I don't know that it can be beat. So then you step up to something like the Emotiva B1 Plus, which does have a little bit more output. It has more neutral on-axis response, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It does go somewhat low. You know, you're still going to need a subwoofer for it.
Right.
Uh, but so that's kind of, to me, that those are the kind of the two main ones in the budget price region. And then I've got the Numi BS5P listed. And that's not necessarily a monitor speaker. It's like the BS5, but just with a powered amplifier built into it. So you can plug it up to your computer speakers or something like that.
So one thing I caught that you said is going from the Numi to the Emotiva gives you more neutral, if you remember correctly. A lot of people hear that comment, more neutral. Obviously, it
More
sounds like a
neutral.
good thing. What does more neutral mean? Like
Right,
people,
right.
not just on this channel, they're going to go to forums and they're going to go, oh, this is more neutral. The implication is that's better. But subjectively, what does that bring to the
Right.
table?
So just think about it in terms of, if I give you an input, an electronic input, and you want to export that out to your speaker, you want ideally the sound from your speaker to be the exact same thing that entered the electronic. So your AVR, your DAC, or whatever, same thing going into that and out of it to your speaker, you want coming back out of your speaker. So when we talk about neutrality, really what that means is the same response going into your system is coming out of your system, right? And speakers are limited in various ways. The more money you spend, the more engineering you have, the better you can make it. But there's always going to be some kind of compromise in every speaker out there, whether it's an SPL, whether it's in radiation or something along those lines. So when I talk about neutrality, I'm talking about an on-axis measured objective response that is flat on axis. And then as you go off axis, that response can vary, but ideally you want it to mimic what you have on axis.
Okay.
And then that's when you get into directivity and radiation. How wide do you like the radiation to be? And you give up certain things. So if you've got a speaker that radiates very widely into the room, then you're going to have a lot of reflections. And in my experience, what you have then is less focus of images in the soundstage, less pinpoint accuracy, versus a speaker that is more narrow. So you can think of like a laser beam shooting at you versus a big wide floodlight. If a laser beam is shooting at you, you're only going to hear what's coming right at you. But that floodlight's going to involve things that are going on around the room from that speaker and then coming back toward you.
I think this goes to a huge discussion because there's no research into this. And the discussion is wide directivity for home theater use because you're surrounded by speakers, right? Oh, are you okay, Aaron? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I just
Okay.
dropped you for a second.
I was saying that the directivity, right? Wait, put this back here. So we're talking directivity. You have the wide and the narrow. My understanding is for home theater, the more narrow, the better because you're surrounded by speakers anyway, and you don't want too much interference with the room or with each other. If it's too wide, it's obviously bad. Is there something to that? Because I know it's not been settled. There's no research into
Right.
narrow versus wide for home theater specifically. What are
Right.
your thoughts about home theater specific speakers, like what you're suggesting in this list?
Right. So just as a personal opinion, nothing really necessarily to back this up, but
Mm-hmm.
I generally prefer a speaker that has a wider radiation because I like the trickery, if you want to call it that, of things bouncing off the side walls in a wider soundstage. I just personally find that I prefer that. And I'm willing to give up a more pinpoint accuracy of things that are in the soundstage or in the movies um, for that. So I think it really just comes down to personal preference. As far as, that being the de facto standard narrow for a home theater, honestly, I've not heard that. I could see where some could make the case for it. If you still, no matter what, you still want a speaker that radiates the same off axis basically as it does on axis, because no matter what, when you get into that, you are going to have reflections from the side wall and from the ceiling. And if they don't come back to you in the same manner that they were sent out directly, then that will cause a little bit of confusion or timbre mismatching, tonality mismatching, and things like that. And that could also cause smearing in the images in the soundstage as well.
Okay, that's critical. For home theater, you don't want smearing. You
No,
want
you don't.
precise because each channel is putting a little bit
Right.
different, right? A little different. So, well, let's go to the next level up. $250, Emotiva B1 Plus, Numi, a little bit more now, $400 a pair, Monolith Encore Calis. Tell us, what does this bring to the table that you feel is worth the upgrade from the previous two price points?
Okay. So full disclosure, I've got the monolith is background in yellow. And if you look at the bottom, you see where it says no personal experience, available data looks worthy, right? So these speakers just dropped. I mean, I think last night, I got a notification that says they're available now. Joe and Tail dropped his review today. He showed some data from his measurements and they look worth a shot. And actually Monolith has data as well. They don't have a full set that I would like to see, but from what's there and the look of the design of the speaker, I think that it's worth a shot at the 170 or 180 bucks they are each. So that's 360 a pair or something like that. I mean, It's worth a shot. So that's why I put it there. Again, that's what's the word I'm looking for here. That's a educated guess, I suppose is the right way to put it.
Right.
Yeah, and then Joe says they have plenty of bass, so I'm gonna take his word for it. Now moving on to the Cali LP6V2, those just came out. I tested those. Those are more like studio monitors. The thing about those is you're not going to want to use them for far field listening for like maybe 9 feet or so or more out, simply because they have a built-in limiter. And what does that mean? Well, that means that as you turn up the volume on those things to protect the speaker, they will start cutting off the bass, right? And you don't want that from a home theater speaker. You don't want bass that's being cut off, but that's part of that design built into it. So you can't really blame the manufacturer. You just have to understand that going into it. And that's the thing that I provide in my data. I wish more people were able to do that, to tell us where the limits of the speaker are, because
Right.
distortion certainly tells you, gives you a hint, but you can have a speaker that has a limiter built into it with little distortion, but you're not going to know that it has a limiter because you need a frequency response at varying outputs. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. This is why I personally like active speakers, because it's all solved by the speaker maker. They matched all the drivers perfectly to the crossover. Well, perfectly, right? But still, it's easier to the crossover and the amplifier. You don't have to go amplifier shopping. I mean, I am just so sick of this. Well, make sure you match the right speaker to the right amplifier.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Really?
You're
Not going to
telling me.
match it, right? Impedance. And I mean, like, okay, it's hard enough choosing the speaker. Now I'm going to spend another 6 months finding the right amplifier. And for me, that, and
it may not even matter.
It may not even matter.
It may not even matter. You may be listening to some dude on the internet. I mean, that's what happened when I tested the clip speaker. Is people were immediately saying, well, you didn't like it because you didn't test it with the right amplifier. And then people were arguing about what amplifier works better. And not like at this point, I'm not even involved in the conversation. It's just other people on a forum saying, well, I use this one and you're using the wrong one, talking to each other. And I'm like, well, how do you expect the consumer to know? So I actually reached out to the manufacturer. The manufacturer's like, yeah, whatever. You can use tubes, you can use solid state, you can use an AVR. We don't care. And then you tell these people what the manufacturer said, and they still argue with you. And I'm like, well, then it's not our fault. Like, what do you expect? Like, no wonder people just give up. It's like, screw this, man.
Exactly. So before we get on too far, I want to share with people why we like the Monolith Encore B6. It's, if you guys look at the waveguide on top here, right? This waveguide right here, this waveguide is on more well measuring speakers than speakers without it, because it helps that dispersion controlled directivity that we talked about, right? And for Monolith to identify that, design a speaker and put it out there within the last 18 months that this has become a thing for $186 a speaker, to me, tells me that Monolith wants to get it right. That series of brands within Monoprice, they're serious. If you look at their THX rated speakers, rated very well, measured very well on Audioholics, from pretty much the same reason. They have this mid-dome placed appropriately right beneath the tweeter in their center channel to make sure there's no comb filtering. I'm like, these guys thought it through. The design looks right, and then it measures well, but the design even looks right. So oftentimes there's a consistency in engineering, and I have to give Hobie a lot of the credit. He is the monolith within Monoprice. He's very particular about how things are designed. He wants to make sure there's some engineering behind it, but then strip all the fluff out and just make it affordable, right? That's probably vinyl. That's not oak, but it's like, who cares, right? Get it out there. So I just love that he did that. I had to show you guys why this speaker looks great. Try to find a speaker that's the same price or less with a waveguide that's well designed like that, and it's so hard. So
I can't think of it. Like when I found out that they were making this, and then for the price of this bookshelf, and then the price of the tower speaker they're coming out with, you immediately think, all right, well, it's got to cut corners somewhere. So where it's cutting corners, the data looks good. It doesn't look perfect that's out there, but it looks good. And you think, wow, $360 for the pair, this might not be beatable, and as reviewers, I personally strive to not use the word best, because there's always something better in a month. The best thing that you've not heard, or I guess the best thing out there is the one that you've not heard yet, right? Because it's an endless cycle with us.
It is.
The TV, speakers, AVR, it doesn't matter. Whatever you want is going to be the next best thing, right?
And for me, like my last favorite speaker that was affordable, and it's still a little over $500, is the ELAC W Reference for $550. And now that this Monolith Encore is here, this will become my reference because it does it even more right than the
Yeah.
W reference for less. Although W reference does look better, right? I understand looks may be important, so that's still great for looks. But if you just want in the dark cinema watching, this thing is designed perfectly for cinema watching because it's black, no reflections,
Yeah.
nothing.
Except they do have a gloss top. I do find that kind of it. I think they did that
That is
for.
weird.
Yeah, I think they did that just to kind of give it a little bit of character, but I almost think you might have been better off not, because gloss, man, if you know how it is, if you've got a gloss speaker underneath your television or
Oh
underneath the projector
man,
screen, that's going to
right
pop
back in.
out. Yeah, it's annoying. That's part of one of the reasons why I went with a full false wall and put my speakers behind the wall and put an acoustically transparent screen up, was because of that.
And yeah, I can agree more. I'm like, okay, if you're gonna save money, if that gloss cost you an extra $20, why don't you route it down to 150 each and get rid of the
Yeah.
gloss or whatever?
Right.
Just go
Or
all the
maybe,
way.
use like a better capacitor or something, maybe increase your crossover just a little bit
Anything.
more or something. I am curious about that, but
Yeah, we
they
should
know what they're
ask
doing.
Hobie. Yeah,
They know their target audience and they know what they're
Yeah.
trying to do. What I hope is that when I finally am able to get this speaker to review, that it actually reviews well, because I'm like, in my head, I'm hyping this thing up. I'm like, oh man, this is incredible.
Right.
Can't be beat. And you don't know yet.
You don't know yet.
Yep.
Well, one thing is for certain. When Hobie's team designed the bookshelf THX from Monolith Monoprice, their biggest mistake was to put that top Atmos speaker. Everybody hated it. And they're like,
Yeah.
if only you sold it without it. He goes, but can't you just disconnect it? You go, no, we refuse to pay for the additional, even though the entire speaker is cheaper than anything else out there.
Right.
The consumer could not stand knowing that they bought a speaker where they have to disconnect the top.
Yeah.
And Hobie's like, can't win with you people.
Fail.
So they released a tower that didn't have it. And then people, but this is a tower. I wanted a bookshelf without it. How does that make sense? So I think this is Hobie's response, right? He goes, okay, I will redesign and give you an even better speaker. Not THX certified, but you know what? Now it's $400 a pair, or less than $400 a pair. So I think that's great.
Right.
But let's double the money. Let's say we got some ballers here. They like Crypto Tech. He's making bank on the great Doge rise or SHIB.
I need to talk to that guy.
I know, right?
I could use that.
And we need to. He needs to invest in a pair of speakers that will last forever. Does $800 get him something that everything that's half the price does not? What is that separation we're looking at when we go up to $800 a pair now?
Yeah, I think when you do that, you're probably talking about more output capability and or finer granularity in the response. But it's hard to say without actually having firsthand experience. So that's why this list is rather thin right now, because I try to base these things on firsthand experience or a really good educated guess. So we've got the ELAC debut reference there. It's actually $550 a pair now. I think it just went on sale. And that's a bookshelf speaker. The Monolith Encore T6, the same thing as the bookshelf we were just talking about, except now it's in tower form with 3 woofers. And I'm willing to bet it's 2.5 way or something. I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I'm leaning toward. The Kali IN5 and the Kali IN8. Now, I've reviewed both of those. Those are powered studio monitor speakers. Those suckers are incredible. And I really, really love those speakers. And I have said to the Kali guys, I don't know how you're able to make a product that's this good at this price and still make enough of a living. You know what I mean? Yeah, certainly they can make money off of it. But I'm thinking, how are they paying some of the, you got engineers, you know what I mean? Like you got a marketing team, you got distribution. Like, how are you paying everybody? So
let's talk about that Kali N8 version 2. I know that was part of our AV Summit.
Right.
The numbers look great. Now, these are pro monitors. However, you're using it as just a home audio enthusiast, right? Because a lot of people, they hear pro, like, you know what? It's not for me. And we're not talking looks. We're just saying, let's just talk about the performance.
Right.
Is there anything separating the Kali, any of the Kali products from a home version of this other than looks? What are your thoughts about that?
So any of the Kali products in regards to the fact that they're active or powered speakers?
Yep. Just for home audio. Like, if you weren't using this as a pro, would you recommend it if they say, I don't care what it looks like?
Absolutely. And I do. I recommend it. I think a lot of people, if you're not necessarily movies, but if we're talking the hi-fi enthusiast who's maybe got an apartment or not listening. And the reason I say that is because, again, with powered monitors, they're designed to get loud, but not go crazy loud. And the reason for that is they don't want you to blow up a speaker. They're expecting that you're going to use it in the near field to midfield, which is, anywhere from like a meter away to 2 or 3 meters away, but not necessarily beyond that. And because of that, the bass is cut above a certain SPL. So if you're going to use them as hi-fi enthusiast or a music or movie theater person, I would say probably that 10 foot distance is probably about where you start pushing the limits, because the bass starts to get electronically rolled off, and then you would need to pair it up with a good subwoofer too. So that's where it has its limits there, but the response of that sucker is awesome, man.
This brings up a good point.
Yeah,
I
the
don't know if
Atom stuff is
Kali,
good too.
yeah, I don't know if Kali has a matching sub, but if they do, this is what I'd normally recommend is the
Right.
pros have the entire package. Just choose the one you can afford, but it's fully matched from the base all the way up to the top. You don't have to worry about integration. It's all integrated. You just plug it in the sub. It's all done for you. You don't have to mix and match, because I think the pros, they don't have time to waste chasing down the right amplifier or the right crossover.
Right, right.
What are your thoughts on matching? Or, okay, so this leads me to that crossover discussion, because I know we had Dirac on about bass management.
Mm-hmm.
What is your philosophy on crossing over from monitors or even floor standards
Well, anything
to
really. Yeah.
the bass, right?
Right.
Is there a crossover point that you say, this is safe, or stay away, or what is your guiding principle?
Yeah, to me, the guiding principle is really the limit of the speaker that I'm matching it to. So the monitors, the tower speaker, the bookshelf speaker, anything like that. Now, in the case of the Kali, they do have a subwoofer. I think it's the WS12, and I think it's like $500 or $600 for it. And the cool thing is, on the back of it, they've got dip switch settings. And if you've got the LP6 or the IN8 or whatever, you flip the dip switch, and it knows, you're telling it, this is the power monitor that I'm using. And then it takes care of everything for you as far as matching it to the frequency response goes. So that's pretty awesome, right?
So how much is the subwoofer from Kali that matches with the...
I want to say it's $5 or $6, I think $600. I'd have to double check. Yeah,
Let's say worst case, 600. Would you buy one, or would you buy two and then put it wherever you need to put it? Or would you, is one enough? What are your thoughts on multiple subwoofers?
My opinion on subwoofers is the more the better. The reason I say that is because I'm assuming that most people are probably going to, when you're talking home theater.
Home theater.
Right. Most people are going to have people over. It's not just going to be you and one chair in the middle of your room. You're going to have a row of seats or a couch or something. And you want the bass to sound good, evenly distributed throughout, right? And that means that you don't want to be hearing all the greatest possible sound because you've equalized your entire sound system to that one spot. You want to make sure that everybody hears a good sound as well. You don't need to be looking at your wife or your kid next to you and be like, or your buddy, when your buddy comes over and he's sitting in the back row and you're like, man, you feel that bass? He's like, dude, I don't feel nothing, because he's sitting right in a suck out, or he's sitting in a peak somewhere and you're hearing all the best bass. So that's why I always say, generally speaking, I would recommend at least 2 subwoofers. And if you can afford it, start adding more onto it. And then every time you do that, make sure to rerun your calibration. A buddy of mine had 2. He started off with 1. He bought 2 under my recommendation. He's like, oh, this is awesome. And he bought a 3rd one for me just this weekend, one of the ones, the Infinity that I tested. Right. And he said, well, what do I need to do? And can I just plug it up? I said, well, rerun Odyssey. Well, he didn't do it. And he messaged me. He's like, oh, man, it just doesn't sound right. I said, well, did you rerun Odyssey? And he's like, no. I said, do that. Call me back. And I never heard back from him. I messaged him like the next day. And he said, oh, well, I didn't message you back because I got it working now. I was like, see, I told you. He's like, man, this sounds awesome from every seat, even in the back row. So, yeah, if you can afford more subwoofers, get more subwoofers.
So this takes me to, because you were just saying, yeah, you plug it in to have a dip switch, but then that combo is treated as a full range tower, so to speak.
Right.
And so let me ask your thoughts on that, because Dirac feels that you should separate it from the towers, or separate it from anything above a certain amount, cut everything off below that, and then just move wherever you need to move it. And so that would kind of defeat the purpose of a dip switch in a home theater, because you would separate and let the AVR with Dirac handle it. Right. Do you like that approach? Do you think that's a good approach? Or do you like treating it as full towers the way a lot of these are designed? Well,
so I would say for home theater, I would let bass management take care of everything and use multiple subwoofers. I think that's the way to go. Dirac, I think, does a really good job of it. I've got Odyssey in my home theater. It does okay, but I've had to go in and clean up a lot of stuff. I got a Pro Audio processor that I use. It's a Rain RPM 88. If anybody out there is using Rain stuff, shout out to y'all the real ones. Because they don't support the Dragnet software anymore, and it's a pain if I want to make changes. That's why I switched over to the Dirac on the front speakers that I've got, because they're active 3-way or 2-way. But yeah, so it's really, when you start talking about this, it's not a one size fits all. You're talking about the crossover point for a front speaker. Well, if it's a bookshelf, 80 hertz at least, but probably 100 to 120 hertz. If it's a
Yeah,
floor standing speaker, again, I would say probably 80 hertz. But then you're talking about distributing the modal issues in the room with the subwoofer or the lower bass, right? So,
right.
and when I say modal issues, most people will know that simply as if you take a seat in your room and you hear a long, and it just lights up the room, and you move over to the other seat, that goes away. Well, that because you have a modal issue at that prime seating position, and then you've got to use EQ to try to resolve that. But the EQ only works for one seat, so now you need multiple subwoofers to make all the other seats sound as good as they possibly can. Dude, it's a downhill slope.
And one thing not many
Uphill
people
slope.
realize is that modal issue starts below the Schroeder frequency, correct?
Right, right,
And the Schroeder frequency is different from room to room to room. So
right,
if you have modal frequencies at, let's say, 120 hertz, I'm making this up, right? And your Schroeder frequency happens to be 120, okay. But you should be crossing over at no lower than 120 to make sure that you take care of that.
right,
But then you have a different room, you go in there, it may be an even higher crossover point at 140 because maybe that's where your Schroeder is. So
right,
everyone who's out there with this hard and fast rule, 80 hertz, 120,
right.
the
Doesn't exist.
easy doesn't exist. What's the Schroeder frequency? Just do it from that point downward, because above that point, you're not going to have those modes. It's a whole different
Right.
physics, right, of the way sound interacts with the room. And people who are, I love heuristics, but this is a wrong heuristic to use where every room is 120 hertz. It's solved.
Yeah, no, there is not a one size fits all. And even above the Schroeder, I mean, that's a transition period, right? So
Right. How big
you're
is that
plus or minus
transition?
an octave or maybe even two, depending on the room size. And the smaller the
Right.
room you had, the higher up that frequency is pushed. So it really just depends.
And here we have a fan. Thank you, Sammy, for that super chat.
Hey,
And for
thank
everyone who
you.
just joined us, all your super chats will go towards helping Aaron offset the cost of shipping the Perlisten S4B speakers back and forth to me, and I will match every dollar you guys super chat today to help him out. So, Sammy,
Appreciate that.
Aaron, he's asking you, "Hi, Aaron. I'm looking for a bookshelf speaker and integrated amplifier for music streaming on a budget. $1,000. Any recommendations?" So maybe 1,000 for the whole thing or 1,000 for the speakers. Let's give them both. What are your thoughts on that, if you have any?
So integrated amplifier. Wow. So what do you think about? Because I'm thinking when I think integrated amplifier, I'm thinking of just like a Denon AVR or something. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what can you
I
get for maybe what $500 at least? For a half
or
decent one.
less, right?
Can you get a good one? Okay.
For me, integrated amplifiers that integrate streaming, and we're talking just getting enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's enough power there. So let's say he gets an affordable one for 300, and the balance is spent $700 on the speaker. I believe that at the budget level, go for the features you need. Forget the power readings, forget all of that. Go for the features you need. Compatible with your Bluetooth, iPhone, Android, whatever it is you need, right? Make sure the features are compatible for your lifestyle use case, and there's a power output, obviously. Let's say with 700 or 6 or 7, let's pull out your little chart here. Okay, what are we looking at? If he has
Well,
$700 to $600 left,
yeah,
what
I
would
think
you encourage him?
I think on that list you've got the ELACs would probably be worth consideration. I still want to know about the monoliths, and that's why I'm hesitant to make a recommendation. So they're on the list because they I don't know, they entice me, I guess is the best way to put it. But the ELAC would be one that I would probably consider. Or I would say that if you're sitting close enough, it might even be worth trying to get that something like the Emotiva B1 Plus, and then pair it up with a good subwoofer, man. You know, and then let
Agreed.
let the subwoofer take over the bass. Don't try to push a bookshelf speaker much below 80 hertz or below 50 hertz or something like that. I would let the subwoofer really shore up the low end for you and play around with placement of the subwoofer in the room, because I don't know if you're going to have good equalization, room equalization in some of these AVRs. You might, but AVRs, it's been years since I've looked, so that's why I defer to FOMO for that question.
And that's another thing, Sammy, is because you're only looking at integrated amplifier for music, don't be afraid of getting a working older one, a used one. Let's
Absolutely.
say the Denon 3500. Oh my gosh, 3500. everything you need. It has some streaming. So look in the older ones with a feature you need. As long as it's working and those features are working, because it's old, it doesn't mean the sound quality is any less. If we've learned anything,
Right.
there has been no improvements in the last 6 years to signal quality or any of that stuff. And the money you save, you can get yourself a second subwoofer, which adds more to your performance than any modern DSP can, right? It's always better just to add a second subwoofer
Yeah.
for that. So hopefully that helps, Sammy.
Yeah.
Well, then that takes us to, all right, I have a little extra bang and buck and $2,000 a pair. Is that the next jump up in performance? What am I improving over the $800 a pair? Because this is a little bit more than twice as much. What are you
Right.
looking at?
Right. Yeah. So again, you're hoping to step up in output and fidelity, right? So speaking from personal experience, I can tell you that the KEF R3, which is now on sale for I think 1,700 a pair, I think they just dropped from 21 or 22 to 1,700. Those are great bookshelf speakers. Now you're still going to want a subwoofer. I think they start to roll off below 50 or 60 hertz in room. You can do better, but I
Right.
would still recommend a subwoofer to go with them once you have the money to get them. But yeah, the Revel stuff always does well, so that's a kind of a no-brainer one for me. The JBL 705P, that's a powered speaker, and that's an awesome speaker.
So now I know the
It's a
JBL is
monitor.
powered, right? So it's powered. We'll
Right,
put that
it's a
aside.
powered monitor, right? Yeah.
The Revel and the KEF, what makes them distinctively better than lesser speakers? If you were to choose one or two things that, listen for this and you'll see what I'm talking about. What would this be?
Right. So generally speaking, you're talking about just fidelity and the response itself, which means a more neutral on-axis sound, a more neutral off-axis sound. The KEF, the standout for me about KEF and its concentric drivers, and this holds true for most every concentric driver that I've listened to date, even the ones that I bought for my car system, which are good, not the cheap, crappy ones like Kenwood makes. It's a different subject. Is that the soundstage depth of those, subjectively speaking, without any way to verify or quantify this via measurements, full disclosure, the depth of the soundstage in concentric designs is just something to behold. And that's the one thing that always stands out to me with the KEFs.
Well, I think that's your experience reviewing that and everything. That's the standout of the KEF. What about the Revel then? Is Revel do something different?
Yeah, so the Revel, so the difference with the KEF and the Revel, just to me up front, besides the depth factor, is the horizontal radiation. Now, it's been a while since I've gone and looked at the Revel, but from what I recall, it has a wider radiation pattern than the KEF, where the KEF is, say, maybe plus or minus 50 degrees, so it may not spray as much energy out to the sidewalls. The Revel will spray more energy out to the sidewalls, and depending on what you like, again, this is all preference. Right. You may prefer one over the other. Now, I prefer the KEF's depth. KEF's, yeah, that's tough to say. I said that 5 times fast. I prefer the KEF's depth over the Revel designs, but I prefer the Revel type designs soundstage width over the KEF. So that's really when you start getting into the minutia, not necessarily even in this price range, but with all speakers. We always talk about the neutrality of a speaker or the on-axis response and the off-axis response, but those things matter when you pay attention to them and do side-by-side comparisons, because you can certainly tell a difference in soundstage characteristics when you have a very wide radiating speaker versus a more narrow radiating speaker. And that's where you really need to pick a few. Like, that's what the objective data is for, is to help you narrow it down to a few that maybe you have experience with, or maybe you're more interested in. Find a retailer that will allow you to take them home with you and demo them and try them out in your room, and then send the ones you don't like back, or take them back to the store or whatever.
I think you bring up a good point, which is nowadays it's easy to demo at home, right, and then return them. It's like Crutchfield designed their buying experience around that satisfaction, whereas before you had to go into a showroom and all that stuff. And I think the common theme among all these speakers, actually every speaker, is add yourself a couple of subs. So you have a list of affordable subs here.
Right.
What separates the Infinity from the JAMO from the ELAC? Why would they choose one over the other, or pay more for the JAMO than the ELAC?
Right. So when I did this last year, I did a 10-inch budget a budget 10-inch subwoofer shootout. That's tough too. And the ELAC to me was the winner because it had really good output for its size. Now, these are more like mid-bass modules. They're not getting into the 40, 30, 20 hertz, like a subwoofer, a home theater subwoofer would. But for 130 bucks, you can't really beat the ELAC. When you step up to the Yamo or the Infinity, now you get more output because they're a 12-inch subwoofer.
Right.
So you get more lower frequency output. The Infinity is actually MSRP is $499, but they regularly go on sale for about $170, and you can currently get the refurb for $200. So to me, that's a no-brainer. That's the easiest recommendation that I can make. Excuse me. Then the Yamo, it doesn't have as much output capability as the Infinity, but it's a more linear subwoofer. And in that regard, that matters to me because it's great if your subwoofer can play down to 20 hertz, but if it's 30 dB lower at 20 hertz than it is at 50 hertz, who really cares, right?
Right.
Where if you can get a subwoofer that has a more linear response where 20 is closer to 50 in SPL level, then that's the one I would default to.
Agreed. That makes sense. And well, again, they're so close in price that if it's not a deal breaker,
Yeah.
would there be a reason not just to go with a Yamo every single time or Jamo every single time?
Right.
Is there a reason other than price that you would choose maybe the Infinity over the Jamo? If price is within this range, you know what? I have an extra $50.
Right.
Other than looks.
Well, the Infinity wins out to me. The Infinity is the best one up there. And the only reason that it's cheaper is because that's the refurb price that you can get it for pretty regularly. Whereas the Yamo, you could probably get one used off Amazon, but I bought some used stuff off Amazon. You're always it's a roll of the dice. You don't know necessarily what you're going to get. Now you can send it back, but that's why I would say get the Infinity over any of the others.
Thank you, CMS, for that super chat. And everyone, as a reminder, if you're here, every super chat is going to contribute and be set aside for Aaron to help him offset the cost of reviewing the speakers because he had to pay $400 shipping it back and forth to me, which is, I think the $100,000 Clipple is the big one we're going to have to help you out with. And for every super chat, I will match your super chat so that we can get him there faster and I can get my speakers back, right? So CMS has a question. Hey, Aaron, have him reassemble it before he sends it back.
I was going to say, I'll send you the empty boxes.
I see cotton and a driver. Where's the rest of it?
That's all you're going to get, man.
You hear about the guy that twice he bought these expensive Sony A7S III cameras from Amazon. He kept on getting bricks. I mean, literally just a brick.
What?
He's like, and Amazon tried. Well, okay, we don't know who's what, but they eventually agreed that maybe it was just a brick that got there. And they're like, you got to be careful. Some of these shipping, even from the Amazon warehouse, you got some people within Amazon possibly switching out bricks, getting you your $2,000 or $3,000 camera, and it ends up being a brick. So,
wow,
I'm just reminded that when you said literally, it's a brick or a pile of rocks.
It arrived bricked. Yeah.
It's made the news a couple of times the last 2 years. It kind of cracks me up. It's terrible. Okay, to CMS's question, I have an extremely lofty ceiling in my living room, 12 feet to 18 feet. That's lofty.
That's not a living room, man. That's a sky.
Right?
That's a backyard.
It's like a church. He bought a cathedral. I don't want to ceiling mount hanging speakers.
I don't blame you.
Can you imagine an earthquake would be just like this?
He'd have to hire a painting crew to come over and do it for him.
Okay, good luck with this question, my friend. Any suggestions for acoustic control? And this sounds like a very reverberant room. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, okay. I was trying to understand the correlation between the ceiling mount speakers and the acoustic control portion. Yeah, I mean, so that's when you start getting into trying to do some acoustic panels, right? Rugs. I don't know what your floor looks like. If it's hardwood or tile or something like that, you can try rugs. Furniture, man. I mean, furniture. Seriously, just not having a leather couch and using something else. But I'm assuming that you're probably talking about things that you can actually change and get away with, as opposed to your wife showing up and you just having a new piece of furniture.
Why is the ceiling covered up in foam?
No, you get spray foam and just stick it up there. It's all right. I've DIY'd my own acoustic panels. You can find stuff out there to do it. I've used is it Rockboard? I think is the name of the product that I use, and they come in different densities, so you probably want to do your research. But I think for 6 acoustic panels, the hardware, so the wood that I use from Lowe's, and then the Rockboard, I was probably maybe $150, $200 in tops for 6 2x4 foot acoustic panels. You can look into doing something like that, which is simply just DIY acoustic panels. Just Google that. You'll find some good information there.
And then, okay, so let's look at also this question in another way, which is if he doesn't want to mount ceiling hanging speakers, which implies you want just ceiling speakers. Is there any way to get you overhead effects without hanging ceilings? And I don't think so, right?
I mean, I don't know, man. I don't really. Were you on the high five when they showed the dude who had the drop down from the ceiling? Oh, they're on
yes,
cables.
I saw that. You
All right.
you guys showed me that on video. I thought
That
it was the
was
weirdest.
incredible. You could always do that. You could have drop down speakers that lower when you push a button on a bracket. But honestly, man, I mean, with them being that high up, I totally get being weary of putting something up there.
And
Yeah,
not to
ceiling fan
mention,
wouldn't help.
he's got a ceiling fan, so
Right,
that's like
right.
getting caught
But
in the
I don't.
wires.
So let's go back to the whole, Atmos versus Oro, right? So
Right.
the idea is Atmos requires overhead, but Oro doesn't.
Oro
Right?
does not.
Right.
That's
So
something to think. You know what, CMS? That's something to think about. So with Oro, wherever your bed level speaker is, if it's close to a wall, raising your height level at the wall up to where it needs to be to get that 30-degree angle down, just keep on going up against the wall, gets you the height effect, and you don't need the voice of God per se to get that additional height. The voice of God, I think, according to the Oro 3D people, is like, yeah, it's an optional add-on. What you want is the two to go up, but unlike Atmos, which is closer here, which you need to hang, these could be at the end of the wall. They're more concerned that it's too close, not that it's too far. As long as you go up high enough, you get the 30-degree, it should be okay. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, that's a good point about the Oro 3D. Now, that's assuming, CMS, you have an Oro 3D capable.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the
AVR.
thing.
You might have to go and buy it.
I do not.
But it's cheaper than getting special up and down construction, I'd say.
The reason I never got into Atmos is because I didn't want to cut holes in my ceiling, Well, that and I'm lazy. But I just did not want to cut holes in the ceiling and have to run the wires to the attic, and then getting to the attic space above my movie room is a pain, right? It's just a royal pain. I tried it. I hated it.
So that means you have to go Oro. I mean, if you want.
If I wanted to, yeah. And if I didn't want to be lazy, right, I would have to go Oro. And that's why, the guys are pushing me to go Oro, and I'm telling them that it's dumb and Oro is just, a gimmick and just to mess with them.
So the Rock City's comment overall I think is interesting because I always point to the JBL 4309 recent review where the measurements weren't great, but people loved it, including Amir. And so this also shows you the limits of a bad, well, I don't want to say bad, but some measures weren't perfect. Imperfectly measuring frequency curve doesn't always mean it's going to sound bad. Right. But if it measures very well, it's more likely to sound good than sound bad. Like, what kind of pattern can we pull from these measures ultimately?
Well, so there's a couple different things. I mean, one, if you're talking about neutrality, so you have like a neutral response, flat on axis, smooth off axis. I keep saying it over and over because that's what, generally speaking, you're looking for out of a neutral speaker. But it is totally possible to have a very irregular, well, I won't say a more irregular shaped on-axis frequency response, but still have off-axis frequency response that matches that. And then if you have equalization, you can go in and you can EQ it to make it tailored to the sound that you want, flat or boosted or whatever. That's where you start getting into directivity index and directivity control is where your on-axis matches your off-axis. So as long as, in my opinion, if there's only one thing you can have, that might be the safest thing to do because then you can always just EQ the response as you see fit, as opposed to having a very neutral on-axis response, but a very terrible off-axis response.
I agree with that. And here's a question, because we're all on a budget. Is it safe to buy renewed speakers like the Klipsch RP600M for $400? So just renewed speakers in general. Right. What can go wrong? Because obviously if it goes right, great for everyone. But where can buying renewed speakers, maybe from the manufacturer, possibly go wrong?
Yeah, number one, pay attention to the warranty. Make sure you can send it back. If you bought a used speaker, I've bought used speakers plenty of times. I've had some that were bad. I've had plenty that were great, showed up fine. And by used, it was really just somebody opened it up and they decided they didn't want to use it for whatever reason. They just shipped it back. So that's not an issue. As long as you can send it back, that's really key.
There's a lot of talk about SVS. And of course, the implication is how much is marketing hype and reviewers just returning the favor, and how much of it is it, hey, this is legitimately good. What is your experience with SVS speakers and your take on SVS in general?
Well, so if you're maybe negative toward the notion that a lot of reviewers are giving SVS a lot of props, Look at the objective data and see how their subwoofers compare to Monolith, because Monolith has really great results and they match pretty much on par. One might be a dB or two above the other, and to me, that's not a significant issue or anything to really worry about. I think SVS makes great subwoofers. They've obviously got to make money, so they're going to, charge a little bit extra from what a DIYer would. Being a DIYer, I mean, I've got my own cabs. I've got two 18s and a four cubic foot enclosure tuned to 18 hertz for each enclosure. Those things hammer, and I wouldn't replace them with. I don't think I'd replace them with anything that I can readily get. I would just always build my own. But
Right.
not a lot of people are like that, or some people just don't want to
I'm not
bother.
one, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and some people, like, there's a lot of stuff that I could totally build myself if I had the time, but I would rather review other things and take the time doing that. So I'll just buy something. But personally speaking, a subwoofer is probably not going to be that for me. Now, that said, a lot of people can get SBS or Monolith stuff, and they're great. They're fine. And if it's worth it is up to you, but they always perform like they say they will. And that's really what matters to me. I don't, if a manufacturer is going to charge a $1 billion or something, you want it to at least do what they said it's going to do. And if it doesn't, then you got a problem. But if it does and you just don't like it, well, that just means you didn't like it.
And that's another thing that you bring up is how bad. So let's say you have a couple of speakers, they're all $800, $500 to $800, and you have some reviewers loving one over the other. But at the extreme case, how much worse can a $500 to $800 speaker sound than one that everyone agrees this is a great sounding $500 speaker, right?
Right.
What is that
Yeah.
separation performance? Because is it unlistenable where, oh my God, this is going? And
Yeah.
where is that issue
Dude,
that separates them?
that's a really, and that's one that I've thought, especially like when I get a speaker in that's really cheap and I think, well, okay, I'm going to say great things about this. And the question I ask myself is, well, why would I spend 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times the money to get something that's way, way more when I am a reviewer saying such great things about this cheap speaker? Where's the line? Why do I draw it? How I justify that price? And usually, like I said, what you really wind up paying for is cosmetics. So the overall look and aesthetic of it. And then the SPL capability, so if you're spending money on a budget speaker, it's probably just not going to get as loud or as low than a speaker that is larger and costs a little bit more money, has more drivers, has more components, things like that.
So here's a question. I'm not familiar with this brand, but maybe you've heard of it. Have you heard the new Cora Audio integrated amp? I haven't heard of it either. I'm looking at it now, and I just got to wait for the Rick, I have to say, you come up with these esoteric brands. He had these dipstick speakers, these French speakers. Diplo? Is that what it is? Wait, I'm gonna have to look it up.
Isn't that an artist? I think that's not like a painting artist. I'm thinking of now I'm thinking of
it's Diptych Audio. And
okay, now I'm looking this up.
Yeah, no, and so actually near you, they have a retailer. I looked it up thanks to his suggestion. Atelier sells them, and they're reasonably priced. They are one of those ribbon powered. They look very similar to the old school ribbon type speakers. Let me pull this up real quick.
Yeah, if you've got it, I want to see them.
Yeah, I'll pull it right.
If you've got it, flaunt it.
I am going to right now. These actually look pretty cool. If this was just for a home, I didn't do home theater. Okay, there we go. This is the Diptych. This is out there in it's a French company. There's a retailer in Tennessee, Nashville, and that's his website. This is the larger one, right? This is 9,000, but I like that they have a cheaper one that's 3,500. And pull it up real quick about. There we go. So this is the one. This is getting rave reviews outside of the USA. So, ribbon type, definitely a ribbon approach, electrostatic type thing, right? I mean, just looking at it, that's what it looks like to me. But if you read the reviews, the subjective ones, obviously, everyone's in love with the speaker, apparently. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. This one is a little over 3,000. Let me look at the price down here. 5,000. There you go. So I guess it was 3,000 euros. Set 5,000. And I have to say, I'm curious. I don't think I can use it for home theater because it's going to have a very wide dispersion. But what do you think about these kinds of designs? Because there's no ribbons on your list. Let's just get that out of the way, right?
Yeah. I mean, the closest thing I think is the Emotiva that's got that folded ribbon tweeter thing going on.
Right.
And I generally like ribbon speakers. I've tested a couple of them, DIY designs that were really good. The cool thing about ribbons is they have a very wide horizontal radiation pattern, a very, very narrow vertical pattern, especially depending on the height of the ribbon itself.
Right,
So
right, right.
there's certainly pros and cons to those speakers. Matching them up vertically with the rest of the speaker is tough, but it can be done.
Yeah, and you saw the vertical one. I guess they had the 15,000 one that literally just goes up 6 feet, which
Yeah,
is
so
probably the
that's like
ideal
a
situation.
that's like a big line array or a flat line array is what I'm assuming. That's one of those designs where you can stand up, like a typical line array where you can stand up. You have the same sound pretty much anywhere you go.
Yeah, like that
Um,
one, right? That I don't know. That
wow,
thing
that's
looks
crazy.
tall.
I would
It
love to hear something like that.
hey, you could drive down there, right? It's
You said Nashville, huh? So
yep.
I'll have to Google this place and see if
Yeah,
yeah.
55,700 millimeters. I can't even do the conversion in my head. What would that
Just
be? That
divide by 25.4 and then
and then
divide by
multiply
12 again.
by 12. You're the engineer. You can do
No,
that in your head,
I
right?
can do it in my head. No, I just tell you what to do. I always
But
Google that stuff, like this many
and let's
meters to
just
inches.
based on this image, I'm just going to guesstimate it's 5 feet to 6 feet high, right?
Yeah.
Is that tall enough to give you that line array feel, or do you have to go higher?
Holy crap. Hold on. That can't be 57, 55 millimeters. Is
Yeah,
that right?
5,755 millimeters. Yeah.
If so, when I Google that, it says it's 18, almost 19 feet.
Maybe that you put centimeters. So maybe no, that doesn't make sense either. Okay, I don't know.
No, that's
Something's off.
huge.
It's just I'm a very small midget compared to that. Hey, Mohammed, thank you for the super chat. And for those who just joined us, a quick reminder, all super chats today is going to go to Aaron to help him offset the cost of shipping back and forth the amazing Perlisten S4B because it cost him over $400. And I do want the speakers back, but it also helps him offset the cost of the incredible investment in the clipboard to help us all understand speakers a bit better, right? So Mohammed has a question for you, my friend.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
buy used, easy to try and resell
Right, yeah.
without a loss, and I agree. I recently bought the Genelec 8250s, and the highs were fatiguing.
Oh God, you don't ask me this question. I knew somebody was going to ask me this question.
I love the 8020 Aaron Perlisten S4B or DND, and this is exactly what you ended up with. If you watch his video at the very end, what did
Yeah.
Aaron say? I gotta A/B test these because they're both so good.
Right, yeah.
Which would you pick and why?
Well, honestly, it's easy. Dutch and Dutch 8C.
I agree.
Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah,
And the reason I say that is because the Dutch and Dutch is full range speaker and it has plenty of output. So I mean, it literally, I think when I measured it, I mean, if somebody wanted to go back to my website and look at the data, you could see it there. But I want to say it was like plus 6 dB in room at 25 hertz against the wall. So it does not lack for output, is what I'm saying. So that one's easy. The Perlisten, the thing about that I didn't like, and I know that it's kind of a touchy subject with other reviewers, I'll just put it that way, is the fact that it rolls off at 100 hertz. So you have to pair it with the sub. And I have a hard time telling anybody, yeah, you absolutely need to buy this speaker because of that. You're still going to have to put a high pass on it and put it with the subwoofer. But I will say that the mid-range in it was incredible. And for that reason alone, it's worth at least considering and listening to, and then deciding if you want to implement it in your system overall.
All right, and also remember, Mohammed, that the D&D 8C has its own amplifier. It has everything.
Yes,
it's
fully
plug
active.
and play, right?
Yeah.
You just plug it. It has its own DAC, so you just plug in
everything
streaming digital feed, and you're done. For listen, by the time you add it up, it's going to cost the same. It's same quality amp and all, and it doesn't. And you're gonna have to have a subwoofer. D&D goes down low enough where, reasonably speaking, you don't need a subwoofer.
You really,
I mean, small enough.
Right. I think most people, if you're talking about just hi-fi listening, you wouldn't need a subwoofer with the Dutch and Dutch, not unless you just were, because I'll put it this way, I was at 4 meters away and I had it doing 105 dB.
Oh, wow.
So 105 dB at about 12 feet, 13 feet or so, that's really, really loud. I mean, that's not peaks. That's like average with me listening to music and I'm like averaging 105 dB. It was insane. So yeah, they definitely do the thing.
And just for those who are listening, personally, if I had a home, I was only going to choose one speaker, I would choose the D&D 8C before anything else because it's so much easier just to put it in, not worry about amplifiers. Just
Right.
it's there, and the bass is there. I don't have to worry about a subwoofer. So my choice would be the D&D 8C,
Yeah,
one-stop shop, definitely.
I agree.
And here's a great question that I think we all think about when we are just geeking out on gear. And stop the FOMO. If your net worth was 350 billion, what kind of speakers would you buy for your home theater? And so for my home theater,
First
I'm
of
still
all,
thinking,
would you have a home theater or would it just be a theater?
right, would
It'd
I
be a
buy just,
full-on IMAX theater for yourself.
I was going to say, so, and I
Specked
think
out.
one of the issues with home theater is the larger it is, the more speakers you have to add. It doesn't mean you get better fidelity because we're talking about fidelity here.
Right.
I think there's a limit to how large you can get it, right? So I would definitely get speakers that would give me precise placement of every effect. And it would probably be something like the Gen X where precision, but then it wouldn't be big. It'd be exactly what a mixer would have in his, whoever mixed these movies, right? They're going to have a small studio,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit bigger than mine, but it wouldn't be massive because I need that accuracy and precision. But it would just be me in the room. I couldn't share with anyone. So this is really hard for me. Okay,
Well,
what
now,
would you do?
why don't you go back to and look at what you just replied to him with and bring that up?
Uh-oh. Yeah. So this was, I was thinking not home theater, but just home audio in general.
Yeah,
I love all speaker technologies, right?
exactly.
I mean, for home theater, it's very specific, but I saw that ribbon, I got all excited about it, and I love what Perlisten's doing. But each one is so different. They have a different sound. I can enjoy that sound, even if it's not accurate.
Right.
And I don't want to limit myself to just like, I'm a billionaire, I'm only going to have a Wilson. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Don't
I'm
do
going to
that.
get sick. I'm going to get sick of that sound. This is what I tell people all the time. Like, look, neutrality is great. I know what neutral sounds like, but what if it didn't sound neutral? How would it sound for this song? We don't know. So for me, I would literally have a room for each speaker technology just to hear what it sounds like and then have my friends come over and just check it out. Just walk into it, listen to it, because that's the fun of being an audiophile. So yeah,
Yeah.
but for the home theater, it'd be a tiny mixing room for me. I don't know how to,
Man, you'd
how
have
to
like the state of the art, like Atmos headphones. That's what you would have. And you
yeah,
have an iPad.
right,
Oh man,
right.
that's awesome.
But what would you do? Because I know you are a family man. If you had a couple of $1 billion in the
Yeah.
bank, how would you spend it on your home theater?
Well, so I do want to address the notion that it's so talking about neutrality, right? You can have a neutral speaker and it still have different characteristics. That's why people say that two speakers that measure the same are going to sound the same. Well, I always say no to that because people assume that you're measuring everything. And most of the time, people talking about measurements only talking about on axis. But when you're talking about off axis, what's the radiation pattern like? You can have a perfectly neutral on axis speaker and a coic, and it be like a freaking laser beam, or you can have one that's omnidirectional, you know, two entirely different sounds. So going along with what you said, I actually would do the same thing. And the reason I say that is because last summer I tested some Bose 901 Series 5, right? They're terrible as far as accuracy goes. I mean, they sound like garbage. But the soundstage stuff that they do, which is not correct by any means, is just so different and so fun
There
that
you
I
go.
get it. I get why people like the speaker, you know, and I also get why people hate the speaker. So I would like to have multiple rooms with different kinds of setups. That would maybe one B&O Baolab 90. To me, that would be, if I were a rich person, that would be one of the first speakers that I would buy. Because the cool thing about that is you can control the directivity of that speaker,
Yeah,
right? So if you
I
want
saw
to, if you're
that.
like, I want this to be totally enveloping and I want the sound to be bouncing off of all the walls, go to Omni, right? Or I want it to be more narrow. I want to hear a more precise image in the soundstage, narrow the directivity pattern up, right? You can
Yep.
just do that with a button push, I guess, or DSP switch.
This takes us back to your observation of the S4B. The directivity pattern be what it is. You heard a little bit more mid-range. Two questions. Is that the creator's intent? Should you be hearing it? But the key is in your curve measurements, it wasn't obvious that you would hear that. So if people were looking at the curve, they wouldn't get that additional mid-range from that curve, but you got it. And so what does that mean? Because the clipple didn't catch it, but your ears caught it. Why?
Right.
Where's that disparity coming from? And you're guessing it's maybe the vertical directivity. Do you have any other guesses as to why it's not reflected in the measurements?
That's the only one that stands out to me because I've measured other speakers that are, well, I won't say the only one. I've measured other speakers that have similar horizontal dispersion, but that one has the most unique vertical dispersion that I've heard to date. But it also has the most smooth, controlled directivity horizontally, which is
Right.
to say, like, let's say that you're okay. So just kind of going to school for everybody who's not paying attention. Give me a second.
We're going to school, guys.
I'm getting there. All right. I want people to understand when I talk about this stuff, and so I'm gonna try to do a crash course. It's not perfect, so if any of you geniuses are out there watching me, tell me I'm wrong. Catch me
Please
later.
do. We
Yeah,
love
no,
being corrected.
catch me later. We'll talk about it in detail. So any speaker has a beaming point. Even the balance mode radiators, they beam at some point, right? And it's determined by the size of the speaker. So a round speaker is going to beam up and down, left and right, the same frequency, right? So most 6.5 inch, 7 inch speakers like this, like raw drive units, are going to beam at around 1 kilohertz, which means that up until 1 kilohertz, the sound is pretty much omnidirectional. It sprays sound everywhere the exact same way. But as you start going higher and higher in frequency above 1 kilohertz, that sound pattern focuses up and it gets more laser-like. So it may be like 10 kilohertz, you just got coming at you, and then it's got some side lobes, some weird stuff going on, right? So what you want to do with any speaker is you want to match up the beaming point to the next speaker. So you have a tweeter. So when you put the tweeter on top of it, you want to make sure that as the tweeter is brought in, that it's brought in to match up with the directivity of that mid woofer. So when you have a very smooth handoff from one to the other, that's a controlled directivity versus one that isn't smooth, where it's like I'm beaming now in the mid woofer, and now all of a sudden
Right.
my tweeter is omnidirectional. That's not a smooth handoff, right?
And
So
that's designed at the crossover level or the
that's designed at
DSP
the
level.
crossover. Yeah, right. I mean, it's driven by the crossover, which is also driven by the speaker and the baffle and other elements if it's a more complicated speaker.
And I think,
So
yeah, well,
yeah,
that goes to expense of what we're talking about, right? You have
right.
the cheaper speakers that do it, but don't do it quite as well as the one that's more expensive that will do it more holistically,
Yeah,
comprehensively.
and you can even have the same issue with a coaxial speaker. So let's say you let the mid range of the coaxial speaker play up to 8,000 hertz, and then you bring the tweeter in. Well, you're going to have a mismatch in directivity. Even though the tweeter is already embedded right in the center of this freaking thing, you can screw it up. So that's
And
the
we've seen
takeaway.
that.
Yeah,
We've seen that for
absolutely.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Calvin, best Atmos setup for open room with no walls to bounce off. So, if you have no walls to bounce off, is that a good or bad thing? What are your thoughts on a home theater setup with no walls?
Well, that kind of gets back to what you were talking about earlier, where we were discussing, directivity, like a narrow radiation pattern speaker for home theater, because the idea is that you've got multiple speakers around you, so the one speaker itself doesn't have to be wide because other speakers are kind of making up for it and filling in the gaps, I guess, if you want to call it that. So I guess in that vein, yeah, you don't necessarily need the walls to bounce off of. The other thing is, you personally speaking, you may not like or prefer the sound of the reflection from the side walls. So that's where you really get into that personal aspect. I know people who want a more narrow sound and people who want a wider sound from the walls and stuff.
And also with DSP, depends on your AVR. If your AVR is the higher end ones, not having walls is a non-issue. They will make sure you have the sound you need with all the immersive effects.
Right.
Walls, for me, just this is my personal speculation based on what we've heard and listened to, is I think walls make home theater more difficult because you have to control for bounces. Whereas if you have a good AVR processor and you have the speakers placed correctly above and around you, then the reflections off the wall becomes a non-issue because all the ambient cues are within that 7.1.4, or it should be, and they're not relying on anything else. Whereas in a stereo, you are heavily relying on first reflection to give you soundstage. I think Floyd Toole has compared them to, and personally, he wants that first reflection. He found the soundstage to not be there anymore if you over treat the first reflection. He doesn't
Right.
think you should treat it at all. but
Right.
that's for stereo. So in his home theater, he's like, he's still trying to figure this out. So
Right.
it's a non-issue. I don't think you should concern yourself too much. Just put the speakers correctly around you and don't worry about the walls.
Well, and I think the one thing is that you don't have walls already. I mean, you can't solve an issue that you can't solve, right?
I,
So that the best Atmos setup, I guess, I don't know what is the best Atmos setup. I mean, because
well,
you're trying to achieve a
this,
standard at the same time, right?
so the best Atmos setup needs to have overhead for the object-oriented math algorithm to work. So you have to have overheads. Bouncing will not give you an accurate placement of the objects. As long as you're able to put overhead speakers and your bed levels are where they're supposed to be, the walls, I believe, are not an issue because the math does not take the walls into consideration.
Okay.
Everything is mixed as if there is no walls. So you should be okay. And David, can we talk about soundbars paired with a C1 or Q98, which are high-end TVs, Sonos, LG, Samsung, Bose with Google Home? I'd go with the Samsung because it has the best balance of both bass, it's got a subwoofer, it's got all the surround, and we're talking the high-end stuff. Samsung will sound better than all four for that. I think it's like $1,800 now. It comes with a subwoofer that's very well matched to it. Sonos, if you have the Sonos ecosystem, then obviously Sonos works because you're in the ecosystem. Bose falls behind Sonos in my opinion, and LG is behind Samsung. So really, I would rank Samsung just for home theater without any music. Sonos, a lot of people say for music it's great, and Bose if you love Bose. I think they all sound good. I would put LG at the bottom of that group. Only Samsung, the most recent one, has a room calibration tool. Whether or not it works is a whole other matter, but that's another thing we haven't talked about. So I mean, I'm big on room calibration, but a lot of times you push it, you're assuming something is happening. It may not even be connected to anything.
Yeah.
Just lights flashing, right?
Yep.
Oh, it's calibrating.
And that's the thing about audio. I mean, it can totally trip you out, and that's why all this stuff is a really personal, feeling because you can easily not change anything, but you thought you did, so you hear a difference. How many times does that happen? I mean, I've had that happen to me when I'm tuning my car system, with a DSP, and changed something, or I thought I changed something, but turns out I didn't hit the save button. So I heard what I wanted to hear, even though I was like, well, it doesn't quite sound like I thought it would, but that's got to be right. I've driven along without subwoofers turned on and didn't even know it for a point.
You blamed it on the music. This is so badly mixed.
Yeah. So we've all done stuff like that, man.
Hey, CMS, this is a great question. So Sennheiser Ambeo, is this still the reference? I have mixed feelings about it. Now, I haven't heard it personally, but among audiophiles who have, their complaint is it's a little bit too sibilant. So what do you mean by reference? I don't know. Does it mean it's accurate? So your source is bad? It's telling you what it's there. It's completely transparent and you're getting sibilance because it's there? Or is it a little hopped up in the sibilance because it's assuming you have walls and it's trying to, I don't know. But the common complaint is it's a little bit too sibilant and a little bit high on that. But if people like that in movies, and that's why they say they like it in movies, because in movies that helps with the effects, because that's where a lot of the effects are, is in the sibilance, right? The raindrops or whatever. So it's hard to say that it's a reference. It's the most expensive, I'll give it that, but I think you don't get immersive with the Ambeo though. So remember, the Ambeo is not there for immersion. It's there for its sound signature. And if you like the sound signature, then there's no substitute. But if you want more immersion, go with the Samsung, well, anything that comes with side satellites, you win. Ambeo loses. So it's because you can't replace real speakers behind you. It doesn't matter what Ambeo does.
Right.
Not everyone has the same wall, because right? Reflective sound bars are designed with specific wall distances in mind. But they don't tell you what those distances are because they know you probably don't have it, so you won't buy it if they told you. So they just have these generic images of it bouncing off walls. For all you know, those walls are only 18 feet apart or 10 feet apart. You just don't know. So do not rely on reflections to determine the soundbar's effectiveness. Get actual soundbars with a surround that comes with it, or
agree.
an option to add later. Yeah.
Yeah, and soundbars, I'll be honest with you. I bought a soundbar for a little bit, or I tried one out for a little bit to review, and I still listen to my TV because I had to send the soundbar back. But I've got speakers, power speakers around that I could use to put next to my TV. I don't want it. I would rather have a soundbar. I don't care if the power speakers sound better. I can't stand the look of seeing big honking monitors standing next to my television. I can't.
What are your
So,
thoughts on the HTA9? Because we talked about it before, where you could just kind of put it generally around you.
yeah.
Would that be something you'd consider? Because that's why I like it. I'm not
Yeah.
saying it sounds better, but it sounds good enough, but it's out of the way.
Yeah. I would consider it. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. The price is like, well,
Yeah.
why spend that much when I could spend $300 on a Vizio soundbar setup to get, you know what I mean? Like, and it be okay.
Right.
You know, and that's the thing too. Like that kind of gets back to my take on active versus passive listening. You know, which one are you? You know, do you listen intently, or are you just kind of watching something and things can happen and distract you or whatever? You like ADHD when you watch TV, or I don't know. So it just depends.
Yep. Here we go. This is kind of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how good it sounds, you just can't stand the speakers there. But Matt does love the sound. I just switched to have speaker setup versus soundbar because I wanted clearer dialogue in movies and games. And so this goes to what you're saying, that neutrality, everything is there. The soundbar is trying to do too much. You have these little 4
If
inchers
that.
and maybe one tweeter, and there's comb filtering where you need to hear dialogue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Most of the sound bars that I've messed around with have been smaller, like little 2-inch full range, and there's only so low you're going to get out of that.
Ah, this is what Aaron loves to talk about. Hey guys,
Low
sorry to
pass.
backtrack. Where would you set a sub's low pass frequency for use with our favorite currently, the N8 V2s by Kali in the near field?
In the near field? Man, that's really going to depend on the room, really. I mean, so here's the thing. Like if you set in the far field, I would say set it as high as you can so you don't run into limiting and you have, you know, the sound that goes to your sub match more of the sound that goes to your speaker. What I mean is when that IN8 starts to limit and starts to roll off the bass, if it rolls it off at like 150 hertz, but your subwoofer is coming in at 80, then you're just going to have a dip between your subwoofer and your monitors because of the threshold level. Where the limiter kicks in. So, you know, when you're talking about near field, to me, that I would say if you can measure your room, even if you get an app on your phone for low frequency stuff, that's good enough just to kind of get an idea of where to put that crossover.
And if you don't already have a subwoofer, the Kali does have a subwoofer that will
get
dip
that
switch directly on this one, right?
That's what I love about it. I mean, they make it easy.
It solves your problem, Bruce.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, so if you don't have a subwoofer that you need to match, just get the Kalis for how much was it? Like $800 you said? Or
I thought it was 600. Yeah,
600?
It's the WS12, I think. I'd have to look it up.
But that's why they made that subwoofer, so you don't have to shop for the right subwoofer. It's matched perfectly. You just dip switch the right monitor. In this case, you're in 8 version 2s, and you're done.
I want to test it, but I mean, this is just pulling it up and looking at the back. It's got all these little dip switches. And I'm like, man, they really thought this through. So
for all, and well, technically, you could just use it for, if it's a good enough subwoofer with a good enough power, you could use it as a subwoofer without the dip switches too, right?
Right.
Because LFE, a subwoofer is a subwoofer.
Right. Well, and so I want to address that just a touch more. I would say that the IN8s, they go low, like easily down to 50. I think maybe even down to 40. I'd have to check again. So you could theoretically use a subwoofer just to help pull that in, or since the port is on the front, you can just put them against the wall, you know, and get you a little bit of more bass output off the wall. You may not even need a sub. It really just depends, you know.
So you bring up a good point. In the near field, meaning that maybe he's in a smaller room.
Right.
There may be enough room support that now you just have too much bass.
Yeah.
Right? Because most rooms are so small, you don't want a 6-inch sub. What's the point? So that's a hard one.
Yeah, and the closer you get to the speaker, the less room mode issues you have, because it's all relative to you versus the speaker, not the size of the room only or the speakers themselves. It's all relative to your listening position versus the speakers or the sound emanating source.
All right. Now, you always have a list of things to review, obviously.
Always.
Can you tell us what speakers are on track to be reviewed in the next month or so people can get excited about your channel, Aaron?
If I haven't bored them to death. Yeah, so I've actually got a lot. Let's see here. So I've got a set of Vandersteen 2Cs right now. They're from the 80s that a fellow from Birmingham drove up and dropped off. I'm testing those. They're literally on my clipple stand testing right now. But I'm kind of running issues with those. Let's see here. The Cali LP8 V2s are on their way to me to review, so I can compare those against the LP6 V2s. Bucart A500s are on their way. The Key Audio 3 is supposed to be arriving this week, and that's what, like a $15,000 or $20,000 speaker. Crazy stuff, man.
I see that. So the Key is the direct competitor. It's a little bit more expensive than the Dutch
Than
and
the Dutch
Dutch,
and
right?
Dutch,
And a lot of
right?
people are arguing that that might be the speaker to beat.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting, and I really hate to compare them side by side in that vein. I'll kind of probably let the data do the talking. They are a little bit different from where they control dispersion as far as like the cardioid response
Right,
goes.
right.
So that'll be interesting to see. And yeah, man, I know I've got other ones that I'm blanking on, but I've got a lot.
I will say the Key 3s, to me, their biggest benefit is their little control unit.
Yeah.
That little,
I love the little volume knob.
that is it. That is why you
tangible having it. Just you can just sit in the seat and just control the volume knob. It's awesome.
And this is a great follow-up from Bruce, right? So it's two. Okay, so that means you don't need a sub. If you have a tiny space and you're near field, that means you got way too much sub.
Yeah. So
from the Ion8, right?
Right. I mean, the Calis, they roll off steep when they roll off, and that's the problem. But the thing is, if that Cali sub is too big, I mean, I don't have the size dimensions on hand, but I'm willing to bet that any other sub that's smaller than that probably isn't going to go do much below 40 or 30 hertz anyway. So I really don't know if you've got any good options without, going to a larger sub.
Yep. And well, we're going to close out this chat.
Yeah, man, I appreciate
everyone. If you haven't asked your questions, coming in, and it's we'll close out in 5 minutes, right? Give you guys time to ask your questions. And I did a quick addition. So you guys have super chatted around $100. So I'm going to match $100. So today we're going to have $200 to Aaron. Thank you, everyone, for your super chats. You can still fit it in the next 5 minutes. It will help Aaron offset.
I might be able to eat Chick-fil-A for supper tonight now because I've been eating cereal for supper the past couple weeks. This is no joke.
And dude, your wife is like,
out.
You brought this upon yourself. First the Clipple, now this shipping stuff. Yep. You're gonna be eating beans. We're gonna have steak. That's
that's pretty much it. Yeah. We went out to eat last night and we split. It's so cheap. We split supper. I'm so cheap, dude. I can't help it. It's so funny.
With your own wife.
Yeah. So, and my kid got her like side of rice. So, I mean, we could have bought it, but I'm just cheap, man. So it's funny. So the $100 donations is a huge help, and then you imagine it is seriously greatly appreciated. I really do. Appreciate
absolutely, because it shows that the viewers take you seriously, and honestly, a lot of them haven't met you yet. So bring you on for the first time. So we definitely appreciate the work you do. So everyone, don't forget to click like on this so future generations could find it on YouTube. And more importantly, subscribe to Aaron. He does really great work. His recommendations goes a far and long way to helping you guys make the affordable decision. And speaking of affordable, I'm going to share one more time this quite cool. Let me see right here.
This is my sheet.
His sheet.
I made it in 20 minutes. I looked at everything I reviewed and said, this is what I would recommend.
This is it, right? This is Aaron's recommendation for your budget based on his measurements. There is under $100 a pair of speakers that you can start off with. So for like the person asking earlier, what can I get for $1,000 that's a good speaker and a streamer integrated amp? Start with the features you need. Sometimes it's over 500. Well, you still have speakers you can always upgrade later, but start with this. Then you have all the features and all the power you will need moving forward. So when you add speakers, it can keep up. So I think that $100 a pair is a great start for a lot of people. Not to mention, a lot of integrated amps with a streamer also have a sub out nowadays. You can throw in a sub. So for $300, you got yourself a $700 streamer, integrated amp with a full pair of speakers and the sub. And having a sub with a pair of speakers will destroy at least two of the speakers that's above it, right? So you got $250 a pair, $400 a pair. Adding a subwoofer takes the NUMI to hold their level. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, these things are always limited by certain attributes, but yeah, when you add a sub, that really takes most speakers to another level. Even floor standing speakers, man, some of them could still use a sub.
All right, that sounds great, everyone. And well, I have to say, I'm thankful for you to make your time, not just to review my speaker, but to talk about it. because that saves me a lot of time when it's my turn to get it back. Then I can summarize everything that you've said
There you
when I do
go.
my review,
There you go.
because most of mine will be very subjective. And that's
Right.
the part is, you know what? I can't replace the real measurements you guys do.
Well,
So
I'm
that's
curious to
why.
see. I'm curious to see how your subjective matches up to my results as well. So
Oh,
that'll
yeah.
be cool for me. You know.
And I will be comparing it with I have a pair of Genelec 8350s,
Hmm.
and I will have them crossed over at the same point with the sub through the trim off. So that way, listening as a stereo pair, at least the bass below a certain point is kind of the same, but then above that
Right.
point, I can focus on the mid range and not worry that, I'm losing that mid bass, which oftentimes ends up being the deciding factor because I know the
Absolutely.
8350 goes lower. Well, now it's not apples to apples anymore. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah. Oh, I had to fit in this last question because Orange Shlomo has such insightful questions the last time. What do you think about the future of resonating panels audio quality? If there's any future at all. Resonating panels. I'm
Yeah.
assuming he means electrostatic, like the Martin Logans, like
Oh,
full resonating, or is there something else? Is it ribbons? What are we talking about, you
well,
think?
actually, the first thing I thought of was that one guy who says he's got the perfect full range speaker for $20 or something, where he puts a transducer attached to a piece of wood, and
Oh,
he's got
that's like
like
the
way over a
Sony's.
million. He's got like way over a million views, and it's just like, dude, those things don't sound that good. If you've ever done it, they sound like garbage. So that's what
Okay.
I was thinking of. But
No,
hopefully,
no,
that's not what
actually,
he's
no,
talking
you're
about.
right. I think this goes to the TVs. So if you're not familiar, Sony TVs, their higher end have the resonating panel. Their
Yeah.
OLED, the A80J, A90J, and last year's A9G or last generation A9G has that acoustic glass where
Mhm.
the resonator attaches to the glass and the glass itself. Not only that, they're able to kind of move the sound from one part of the TV to another, depending on where that
Interesting.
resonator is, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you look at the measurements from ratings, now it's not a clipple, but
Yeah. It's
it
good
at least
enough.
gives you something.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people say this sounds great. This is it. This is all I need. I don't even need a soundbar. Obviously, it's gonna drop off at probably 120 hertz, but above 120, I think it's fine. For TV, I don't think it's bad. I don't know about the future of resonating panel. I think the future is as long as it's cheap, more TVs will adopt it. But if
Hmm.
it is a premium, I don't know if it's that much better than TCL's regular speakers, which currently I believe the TCL speakers, whether it's the 5 or 6 series, probably one of the best speakers on a TV. It comes with a TV that money could buy. And this includes my $2,000 and $5,000 Samsung flagship TVs.
Wow.
Both of those audio does not match to a $700 or $1,000 TCL 5 or 6 series, respectively. So keep that in mind, guys. A lot of these companies are just cutting their audio quality and telling you to buy a matching subwoofer system to make up the difference. It's because they put almost no money into the audio of that TV. That's what I notice when I compare. So I don't even bother comparing audios. Like, it's ridiculous for me to say the TCL sounds better. I'm like, well, what does that even mean? So
Right. Yeah. It's
yeah,
comparing bad to worse, right?
right. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna buy a $4,000 TV and consider a TCL 6 series at 1,000. No, that doesn't happen. Okay, I've kept you long enough, my friends. Oh, damn.
You got one more.
Since he's a paying customer, thank you for the super chat. Let's answer this one more time. How are you managing the highs of 8350s? Did you find them a bit fatiguing, tone, dip, or purely room correction? Well, the 8350s do have the GLM equalizer, so not a problem.
Mhm.
If I didn't have the GLM equalizer, it would be fatiguing, but always get Genelex GLM equalizer function that allows you to have these shelves. And if your room makes it fatiguing, you could correct for it. And that's why you pay a little extra. Otherwise, the 8050s are great for a lot of people that don't need the GLM, but I got it specifically for the GLM. So yes, room correction with the GLM and EQ. Currently, I have it and it's room corrected. And it's right behind me, and I don't hear any sibilance at all. But that's because I had it room corrected for my room, and I have bad hearing anyway. Did I tell you this? I can't hear above 16. I can't hear above 14,000. So
Well,
where is sibilance? Tell me before we go. Where is the sibilance
it's
that
like five
bothers
to
me?
eight. Five to
Okay,
eight usually is where five
so
to
there
eight
you go.
kilohertz.
Yeah, it's balanced for me. But then I want to hear sibilance, by the way. That's where I correct it because I use that to
Really?
mix.
Okay.
Yeah. Like we all have these weird nasally noises that
Yeah.
bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it happens in that frequency or not, having this, I go, okay, I hear it. Just start eliminating it.
Yeah.
That's why I want to hear it. But if you're using
Yeah.
these speakers for pleasure listening, yeah, you could equalize it out. So,
Yeah.
okay, everyone.
All right.
Thanks everybody for coming by. And
Yeah.
Aaron now is that much closer to shipping me my speakers.
Yeah. Now you only got to wait 5 more months.
5 more months. Remember these things. All right, everyone.
I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Until next time.